So if we flag a child who's non-compliant in a school, they are treated like a threat in clinical evaluations, in foster care placements, and definitely in police encounters. And we know how that ends. So diagnosis now becomes the gateway to containment. Surveillance becomes punishment in advance. And Black and brown neurodivergent children are monitored long before they even understand themselves. So ask yourself this: if you're watching this later on in your institution, who gets to be labeled disruptive and who is gifted? Whose distress do we invite scare, and who is pathologized and criminalized or ignored? And these are not abstract questions. These are systemic design failures. And they're not causing harm, they're costing lives. They're the reason a lot in our society right now is failing. Now let's move to the current, because I'm keeping an eye on time. If we come to today and look at mental health systems, educational institutions, where we're still punishing humans for humaning, but not harming anyone. What does that look like? Because these systems didn't just reframe difference. Have we paused to think about what it buried to exist? Because most often, the systems we are using today buried centuries of existing knowledge about what difference meant before the DSM. And this has been a huge part of my research the last few years in searching for my own self and in my cultures, because I come from 4 different cultures, 4 African cultures. Of course, Sweden and England too, but 4 African cultures, and I have access to quite a lot of background. So let me name this one also clearly. I don't speak from lived experience. I work with data. I work with science too, but I work with multilingual data sets. I speak 7 languages, but I also speak nonverbal. So I've had to work with oral historians to kind of unearth information about neurodivergence. I had to work with archives, some of it still in process of being translated. I also use the DSM, but not in the way you might think. It's about describing the things in the DSM and telling it to people in a cultural way and to asking them, what would we call a human like this? And the answer started clarifying. So over the past several years, I've just been documenting this body of work. Neurodivergence, what did it look like in pre-colonial Africa? And what does it still look like in certain places where we don't pathologize? It was interesting, it is everyday interesting. Because the West African cosmologies had long recognized neurodivergence, not in pathology, but what they frame as spiritual roles, communal functions, and ecological necessities. And suddenly neurodiversity emerged again, because they call it ecological, but neurodiversity is like biodiversity, but of brains. So this body of research was grounded in qualitative methods that will not always be legible to Western institutions, because some of it is nonverbal. Meanwhile, we're trying to make the nonverbal verbal. So going through the Fuller, Mandinka, Wolof, and Serer communities, I started seeing some phenomenal mapping of sensory traits across different ethnic groups and what some call tribes. We were doing comparative analysis, including Yoruba, areas of Casamas, Senegambian spiritual systems, and deliberately decentralizing the DSM, but using it as a source to interpret these humans. that were just left alone, but still supported. We didn't need to use the DSM to validate what was ancestral knowledge. I just wanted to understand, upon meeting the West, what did they not understand and bury in how neurodivergent persons were supported in community?